Welcome back, coders, and welcome to another edition of Coding with Java. So today I want to talk about SQLite. Oftentimes in your programming, whether it's for academics or for your own applications that you're building, you're going to need a small database to work with. And obviously Microsoft Access is not the solution. MySQL is a very good solution. I've used MySQL, I've used Microsoft SQL Server. All of those are really nice. But when you just need a small database where you don't have to worry too much about security, or you don't want to worry about configuration, audits, logging, any of that extra stuff that you often do need in an enterprise quality database, then I recommend SQLite. I used this to do some of my research, and I use it for some of my applications that I build, and I find it to be just an amazing, fast little database. So I'm here on the sequellite.org page, and this is where you download your data. I'm not going to read all of this, but I am going to just say a couple of things about it, and that's that it's self-contained, serverless, zero configuration. So those first three links up on top, this is the selling point right here. Just nice and easy, just something you need to throw in, and you can write SQL in it, so it'll work. You can build triggers, you can build views. I mean, you guys can go to the link and read all about it. You can go here on the executive summary and read the database, max database size, whatever you need to know. But my video is not too much really to talk about SQLite, but rather this video is to discuss how to install it with C++. I did another video where I connected to Python, and the Python process is really easy to do, but the C++ one is a little bit more challenging, and just a few things that you need to know, because if you're using SQL Server 2019 like I am, and you want the latest code to make this thing work smoothly, then that's what this video is for. Okay, so this is the page where we talk about SQLite. Really where we need to go to is the download page. And from the download page, you're going to get a lot of information, and it can be a little challenging to know where to go. But this is the file you want right here, the SQLite, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, but this file right here. And so we're going to want to download this. So I'm going to go through the whole process and show you what we need to do. So from the download page, go to this file, click it. I'm going to go ahead and grab it, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I downloaded the file, and what you're going to get is you're going to get this this file here, and it's going to contain these files here. You'll see your two sources and your headers. Now it really depends on how you configure this. The method that I'm going to use, we only need one file, and that's this one right here, the SQLite 3.c file. And so we'll grab that, and we'll put it into our code in a little bit. But like I said, the first thing you need to do is you need to download this file. It'll come down as a zip. Just unzip it to wherever you want, and you're going to need the SQLite 3.c file, and that's the only one that we're going to use in the way that we're going to set up our setup. Okay, so let me get some code up, and then we'll get some work going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a console app in C++, and we'll be using the SQLite as a backend. That's why it's a C++ SQLite demo. I went ahead and just added just really one thing here. I added the using namespace std, also the stdio.h, and the IO stream. Oh, and I guess I have two of those. Let me get rid of that. That was an accident. Okay, so now we're good. And what we need to do is we need to add that file, the SQLite 3c file, to our setup. So we're going to do that right now. So let's go into Solution, and where you want to add it is into the source files right here. So go ahead and right click on Source Files and click Add Existing Item, and we're going to go right into here. Actually, we're going to go to the desktop. And we're going to go to the directory that we just downloaded, this file here. We're going to grab the SQLite3.c file. This is the one you want, the C source file. Let's go ahead and add that. And here it is now. Okay, and that's the only file that we need from the files that we downloaded. Now, we do need to do something else. We're going to do that right now. We need to add a package from the NuGet package manager, and we're going to want to install the SQLite 3_c_++ by Dawlin, Pena, and Allam, Gallan. So we're going to do that right now. So go up to this right here to your directory, do a right click, do manage NuGet packages. We're going to look for browse. It's the easiest way to get there. And then we're going to just type in the SQLite 3, and you can see I've done this before, so we'll just grab it from here. And what you're going to want to do is come down to, it came right up. This is the one we want. So this one here by Dawlin and Pena, and you go ahead and download it. And you can see what's happening here, successfully loaded. We can go to installed, and here it is. We have it installed, so we're good to go. And we can now click out of that. And we're now ready. So when I was trying to install SQLite to the C++, there was a lot of old code out there and old configurations where it just really wouldn't work. And I'm sure there's probably 50 different ways to make this connection. But I found that the simplest way was the way that I just went through, adding that package and then adding this SQLite3.c file to the source. If you don't do this step right here, the code won't work. Maybe because SQL Server, maybe because Visual Studio 2019 is just not quite configured for it yet. You have to have this file, and it took me a while to figure that out, but it does work. So anyways, now that we have that, we can do a few other things. And we're going to want to add the include, and we want that file right there. And that's all you need. So these two files, this studio.h and the SQLite3.h, which it's the package that actually lets you grab this from the header, but for it to run you need this source file right here also. Okay, so now we're ready to start coding. I'm going to code a little bit and then I'll explain. Okay, so I have a bunch of code up, and what I did was I created two new functions, the static int createDB function, taking a constant of which I'm going to call S, and also static int createTable. So I'm going to create the database and I'm going to create the table. And another thing I did too was I created a directory in my C directory called delete me, and that's where I'm going to put the database. As you can see, there's no database here yet. We're going to build that. Okay, so we have the directory, which is going to be C delete me students. So in this directory, the students.db is going to be created, and I call my two functions that I have listed up here. CreateDB, I'm going to pass it the directory, and createTable, and I'm going to return 0 since it's an int main. So in the createDB function, we have a static int function, and we are going to capture the directory, so the directory that's passed. We're going to be using SQLite 3DB, and we're going to use the exit as an int return. So right here, this is going to say, okay, the command for SQLite 3_open is going to take the directory string, so the delete me students DB, and it's going to try and open that database. And that's what this part right here means. So if the database doesn't exist in SQLite, what will happen is it will create it. So obviously our database does not exist. It goes there to this directory, tries to open it up, doesn't see it, and then it creates the database. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do after it's created is we need to create the table. So I have the next function here, createTable. I also pass it the directory string. So the createTable, it's pretty straightforward and simple. We're going to take a look right here at the DB, and we're going to pass the DB, we're going to pass a SQL string. So I create a SQL string here and say, okay, create table, and I'm going to use an if not exists. You don't need this unless you're going to be doing testing and recreating. So I throw it in there just so I can run my code over and over again, and it doesn't try to recreate the table once it's been created. So you might want to look into a little bit of SQL if you haven't written any SQL, but SQL is a very simple language, and literally you can learn it in 15 minutes. The little key things that you need to know. The advanced stuff, of course, you need to get a book, but it's just basic SQL and pretty simple. So create table, if not exists, grades. So the name of the table is going to be grades, and we're going to have these column names. These are column names, also known as attributes, field names. And the first field name is going to be called ID. It's going to be a data type integer. It's going to be the primary key, and it's going to auto increment. I like to auto increment. I want the system to go ahead and give me the numbers, and I usually use those as object IDs for editing or updating later on. Okay, the next one is going to be name. It's going to be of data type text, and it will not be null, which means it must have information. And the other ones are roughly the same type. Address is going to be a char of 50 characters, and grade is going to be a char of a single character 1. So that's really it there. So a little bit of embedded SQL. Next, we're going to open up our database, and this time it exists, so we'll just open it up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass it the next command, and this is simply a callback command here. And what's going to happen is we're going to use it here to say, okay, if this doesn't work, then let's pass the error back. And so we just have a little if-else statement for error handling. Okay, so it'll open it up. I'll explain the callback in a little bit later because I still need to do some more work with that. If exit not equals SQLite okay, and then it'll create the table, or it won't create the table. And if it does create, it'll say, oh, it was created successfully, great, and then we'll have this catch here. So that's really it. It's a pretty simple, straightforward thing. We'll go ahead and run it here and test it. Okay, so it came back. It says table was created successfully. We have a table, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to write some code to enter data into the table. All right, so the next thing I did was I created the static function insert data, and again we're going to make it a constant char, and then we're going to use it for s, and remember this is so that we can pass the directory string. In the main yeah, I guess it's right here. In the main we're calling it right here, so actually let me pull this down a little bit more. Okay, so here we have it. Here we're declaring it, and here we're calling it right here inside the main function. We're passing it the directory right here that you can see from line 18 is being passed to the oops, I did not do it. I'm sorry. Thought I did. Okay, so we have our insert data, and now we have our function that we wrote down here, and so it's static insert data. Remember, it's taken in the directory and SQLite database, our message error, open up the database, and now we're going to do our insert. Again, this is just a standard SQL statement that you can look up anywhere online, or like I said, it's just standard SQL, really simple. Insert into the table named grades, into these column names, name, L name, age, address, and grade, what we created above in the create table. These values, Alice, first name, and then last name, chop out. So each one of these correspond to the field name. So name corresponds to Alice, chop out corresponds to last name, 35 corresponds to age, and so forth. And then we're going to do a second one and a third. So we're doing 3 separate entries on line 83 through 85. Then in line 87, we're going to pass it the SQLite execute button function, and so we're passing it this information, and then which is basically it's saying it's a DB. We're passing it the SQL string and our message error. I will explain some of this in a little bit, but right now I just want you to know this is the SQLite execute, and you must pass the DB. The most important things here to know, you must have the DB and you must have the SQL string, which is this part right here. Okay, so once that's happened, it'll insert the data, and if it fails, then we'll get the error message here. Okay. So I ran it, and our information is that the tables were created successfully, the records were created successfully, everything went well. No problems, no issues. So the fourth function we'll be creating is, I'm going to go ahead and create the select function next, because we've created our database, we've created the table, we've inserted data. We now want to see that data being retrieved. So I'm going to go ahead and write the select statement, and then I'll explain the code. So there's a whole bunch of work that needed to be done for the select data, but I'll go ahead and explain it now. The first thing we needed to do is we needed to add two functions for this to work. And the first one is the select data, which I wrote, and what it also, like the other ones, will have the S directory where the constant char for S, which will be the directory string, and then also the static int callback, which is something that SQLite requires. And I'll explain what these values are here in a minute. But we needed to add these two on top so that we can access them beneath. So here these new functions are declared, and then on the second part of the screen down here on the split screen, you can see that they were created, the functions and what they actually do. So we'll start with the callback. The callback function retrieves the contents of the database and is used by the select data. And so I commented it here. Now these values here that you've been seeing in some of the other code, they're required by SQLite to pull the data back. So I went ahead and listed from SQLite's from their website's information what they mean. So the first part here, this first argument is not used, so we just void it. The second one is called the argc, and argc is the first one I listed. It holds the number of results, so the number of results that are returned from your query. The next one, argv, holds each value in an array, and then the az column name holds each column. So your column name, your values, the number of returned, and then not used, and those are what your arguments mean. And I listed the information right here. Okay, so knowing that, you have to call inside your callback, you have your for loop, and it just iterates through the number returned, and then outputs the column name and the value. So that's what's going on here on lines 19 through 21. A for loop, we have our count, so argc gives us the count, and then we iterate through and we return column name and the value. And that's it in two different arrays. Pretty simple. So the callback again is required in SQLite with C. All right. So up here in the select data, now that we actually want to select our data, we have our directory, and we again have to tell it that it's going to be SQLite database, and we're going to open up the database in line 105. Then we have our select statement. Select everything. So this is just a SQL statement that means I'm going to select everything from the table of grades. I want everything. Now you could put a where clause in here, or an order by clause, or something if you want to be very selective. Maybe select just a single record. This statement right here on line 107, that's where that would be done. But I'm just going to pull everything that's in there. Now the next thing is to open the database and evaluate the SQL statement. So here we have the SQLite execute, which we've used before, and we use it in all of our commands to SQLite. Again, it has the same values that we need to tell it that it's going to be using the database SQLite, that it's going to pull the SQLite string. It's going to evaluate this SQLite string. We're going to use the callback function, which we needed right here, and then these are just null values. Now these actually have meaning. For example, I listed them up here, what they all mean. So open database, SQL to be evaluated, callback function, the first argument to callback, and then the error message written here. So the last null is the error message, if we were using that. I didn't use it in the select. I'm going to use it in some of the other ones, so you'll see that. I think I used it up in here. Yeah, I did. So in the SQL open, I have an error message, and in the insert function, it should be one in there too. insert function, you know, I have an error message. I use the error message in that one too. Okay, so that's really it. It's pretty simple. I'll scroll through the code real quick from top to bottom. Create the database, create the table, insert the data. You have to declare your statements, your functions, I mean. And then from the main, I like to call everything from the main. I give it the designation of the database. Remember, if it doesn't find it, it will create it. And then I create the table, then I insert the data. Now I commented out insert data because it's not something you want to do twice because you don't want to have duplicates. But we'll go ahead and we'll run it again. So right now in my directory I don't have anything in here. And if I run this, it should work. We're going to go ahead and uncomment that and run it. Okay. And so the first thing I want to show you is that in the directory it created the table students. In that database it created the table grades. And then with our code we were able to pull out the information. So it tells us the table was created successfully, records created successfully, and then it retrieved them. And this is the information that was inserted in the insert function. So I'll just set it there for a moment. So here's your insert function, and from lines 79 through 98, and then this is what it returns in the console. Okay, so now we want to do some more things. The next thing I want to do is I want to do an update statement, so to show you how we would edit information in one of our records. And I'll write some code and then explain it. Okay, so what I did was created the update statement. And so just like I did with the other functions, we have to declare it. Static int update data, and again we're going to pass it our directory string, and that's done right here. Now the next thing is in the main. I commented out the insert data because I don't want to have duplicate data. I don't want to run the insert again. This time we're going to do an update data. So let's go ahead and take a look at the update function. In the update function we have our usual declaring the DB. We are going to generate our message error, and then we open up our database in line 108, and in line 110 we have our SQL string. And so this time we're going to use the SQL code update table grades, set the column grade equal to A, where the last name is equal to Cooper. So we're going to modify one row. It's important to remember that when you do updates or delete functions, you must use this where clause, because if you don't, it will upgrade every record to an A, and it's just you will mess up your database, especially if you had like hundreds or thousands of entries. It would be really challenging to undo that mistake. So always try to use a condition here and let it know where you're gonna do your update. So in our case, we're looking for Cooper, and we're going to upgrade his grade from, I think it's a C, to an A. And then you'll notice our usual SQLite 3 execute, and it has the typical arguments that we need to pass it. This time we are passing it a message. You'll recognize the SQL string argument here. So we pass it. If it doesn't work, we're going to get a message error. If it does, we'll get records created successfully and return 0. Good to go. Okay, so that's it. In our main, we'll go back through creating the database, which just means open because it's already created. We'll create the table, but remember it already exists. So in our SQL code, it just won't create it. It won't recreate the table. We did comment out the insert data, so that way we don't have duplicate data. And then this time we're going to run the update data, this function we just created, to upgrade this exact row. And then we're going to select our data so we can see what happens when we return. Alright, so I ran it, and this is what we get. Table created successfully, records created successfully, and we look down at Fred Cooper, and here we have his A. So we upgraded his grade from a C to an A. And so our update statement worked. And that is almost it. The only other thing I want to go over is the delete function. Okay, so I created the delete function. We have static int delete data, again passing the same argument for directory. And then in the main, I went ahead, oh, and I didn't do it. I want to put it right here. One moment, let me check and see what I did. Delete data. Oh, don't forget what I did. Okay, so we have our delete data function. We're going to call it, we're going to pass it the directory. This time we're not going to do any updates or any inserts, so we just want to delete the data and then see what's in the database. Oh, and then the delete function's right here. So static and delete, we get our directory, it's a SQLite database. We open it up, we create the SQL string, delete from grades, the table, so delete everything from table grades, that's what this means in SQL. And we pass our usual arguments, the SQL string, the database, SQLite, the SQL string. We have our callback function. I'm not going to worry about any messages this time, and we're just going to return. And so, yeah, the table wasn't really created. Remember, it looked at it, it already exists, so it didn't do anything. And nothing was returned. So that worked. We can also insert. I usually will run the, well, let's see, I usually run the delete and the inserts together, so that way we'll delete data from the table and then insert and have clean data each time. So let's, oops, something went wrong there. Look at that. Insert data. Okay, so one moment while I debug. They accidentally commented out upon the namespace. So, and we actually don't want this commented out either. Normally, once you've created these, you don't comment out from here. You comment out from where you're calling them. And I'm calling them inside the main, so we want to leave that alone. Okay, so this is all good now. Let's run that. Okay. So you can see the object ID incremented 4, 5, 6. We have the same information. That's good. Okay, so if I was to do this again, the object ID should just continue to increment, and it does. So here's your object ID 7, 8, 9, same information, because it's just reinserting the data over. Well, it's deleting the data and then inserting, but the counter, the auto increment, is still keeping track, and so it just keeps incrementing, even though we only have the 3 entries in the database. Okay, that is my tutorial on how to attach SQLite to C++. I'll go ahead and get rid of the split screen and go over the code nice and slow. And so here we have the our required includes on number 8, SQLite 3. We have our functions declared on lines 12 through 18. I'm calling everything from the main function. I declare the delete. I declare the directory string on line 22. It's going to be a database SQLite on line 23. We pass it the directory string and all of our functions in the main on lines 25 through 30. And then we have our individual functions. The create function, really simple. Remember, if it exists, it just ignores it. It just opens it. So it either opens it or it creates the database. Create table. Just straight SQL on how to create the table. But that would be a different topic if we wanted to talk about how to write SQL. I don't know why this little line comes up. It's not actually a problem. It actually runs fine. Okay, and then let's see. The insert data function is here with no problems, and the update function is here also with no issues. And then lastly, the delete function, well, not last, and the select data function. So I'll scroll through it nice and slow again. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It can be challenging to do the connection, but if you follow the little steps that I gave in the very beginning, it works really well, and it's pretty simple. There are probably other ways to do it. This was the simplest way that I found. So if you have any comments or questions, just let me know in the comments.